There is a custom white balance setting that you can use. Why would you want to use custom white balance? Well, custom white balance is something you can use when you need to get something 100% perfect, accurate. So let's think about like you're shooting a wedding and it's inside of a cathedral, and on the sides there are stained glass windows with all these different colors coming through. Light is shooting through them, projecting it into the scene. You've got overhead lights. And what do you need to make sure is accurate? The bride and the groom, right? Especially in a setting like that, the bride's dress is what you can kind of use to make sure that you have neutral colors neutral, because a bride's dress is typically white, not all the time, but typically white depending on the culture you're in, etc. You're going to go into your white balance settings and go down to the one that says custom, and depending on the camera manufacturer you're using, they might handle it a little different way. But once you choose custom white balance, it's going to prompt you to figure out what to do next. So let's say that it prompts you to take an image. What you want is to take an image of the subject that you're going to shoot in that exact color temperature, whatever that lighting is. And in the example of like a bride's dress, you could just zoom in on the dress and make sure you get just the dress. No flowers, no nothing else, just a tight shot of just the dress. And then it could use that, make sure it's not overexposed. It can use that to say, okay, I want to make this white remain white. The more accurate way to do it though is to make sure you have a gray card. You can buy these really cheap, or you can just make them yourself in like a Microsoft Paint or Photoshop, whatever you happen to have. You can just like make a big swatch of like 18% gray. 18% gray is the standard basically in the industry. So if you take that and you put that in the scene, you have like the subject hold it, or if you don't have a person as your subject, you just make sure to put that in the scene, zoom in on it, make sure the light that is going to hit your subject is hitting that gray card, take the shot of it. Custom white balance will say, okay, that is neutral. I want it to remain neutral, so I'm going to base all of my colors off of that. There is one more way to get a very accurate white balance, but it's a little tricky. This way is to set a manual Kelvin setting. So if you know 100% sure that you're only using one light source and you know exactly the color temperature of that light source, let's say that you actually have a meter to read the color temperature, then you can tell your camera, okay, this is 4500 Kelvin. You can set the exact Kelvin setting on your camera to make sure it's exactly accurate. This is obviously only for scenes where you can tightly control the color temperature that's hitting your subject. I don't use this a whole lot. I would rather use custom white balance instead of the Kelvin setting. So what if you took some shots and you forgot to change your white balance setting? Let's say that you had taken some shots in a sunny situation, so you set your white balance to sunny, but then you went inside and forgot to change your white balance to a new setting. And so you upload your images, or you pull your images off your camera, and the white balance is all over the place. Well, here is where the choice of the type of file that you capture really matters. RAW files do not actually capture all of the information and bake it directly into the file when they capture it. They capture all the information, but the data in terms of the pixel depth information, or the pixel information, that what color they're going to be, etc., is actually saved in a sidecar file. It's called an XMP file. And so it's not actually applied to the image. That's one reason why RAW files are so much bigger than JPEG files, because they capture the information, but then they also capture the sidecar information to change the basic information later. A JPEG, though, bakes all that information together right when you capture the image. So what that really means is that if you capture raw images, and let's say again, you had captured some in a sunny setting with the sunny white balance setting, but then you went inside and you left it on sunny white balance, you could change that in post and it would not destroy the image at all. It wouldn't change anything about the pixel information. But if you did that with a JPEG, it would actually have to physically change pixel information, which would be a destructive edit, and you would start to see degradation of the image. Let's take a look at a couple of images here. These are raw images, and I'm editing them in Camera Raw, which is how Photoshop edits raw images. And so this first one here, obviously both of these images were taken of the same subject, just under different lighting. So this first one here was taken outside, and it was shot with the daylight setting for white balance. And it's probably not exactly perfect, especially because you can tell that it's in shade compared to the rest of the image. So before we go any further, let's just double check and make sure that it is balanced correctly. Now, over here under color, you can come in and you can change it to a different preset. So like if you wanted to see what auto would have looked like, there we go. If you think maybe it should have been in the cloudy setting, daylight, etc. I'm going to go back to as shot, and I'm going to show you how to get this as accurate as possible. Because honestly, if we just change between these different ones, then you're kind of just using your eyeballs to judge it. So let's do it a little more scientific. I want you to kind of look up here, up at the top of the histogram, because what I'm going to do is down here, I'm going to click on this little eyedropper. Now, up there where the histogram is, you'll notice that it has red, green, and blue values. What I want to do is I want to find an area in this image that I know should be neutral. On this statue, I know that it is gray, and the best place to get a reference point is right down here in a solid area. So because I know that it is an actual neutral color, meaning that it was painted gray, it's not, painted like up here in the red or this brownish area. Those are not neutral colors because they actually have a hue of color. But down here, this is just true gray. Look at those numbers. It says 142, 156, 168. In order for this to actually be color balanced, because this should be neutral right here, all three of those numbers should be identical, or at least within one of each other. So I'm just going to click with this eyedropper and watch what happens. So you saw the image change. That's not the important part. The important part is looking at those numbers. Look now, 157, 157, 157. Those are all neutral, or they're all the same. So that is now a neutral color. So this area is actually gray. Now, if I move around the rest of the image, we're going to see that the numbers are going to bounce around just a little bit. But they're even down here where this is like white paint, this is pretty close, 157, 154, 150. The reason why I'm not too worried about that is because there's a lot of texture, so that can throw off those numbers, but at least I know that this is pretty accurate. So now I've set a custom white balance in editing to get this to look correct. But the previous problem I was talking about, this is the first image I shot and I kept my white balance on daylight. So let's just say I came inside and I forgot to change my white balance setting from daylight to tungsten, and I'm shooting under tungsten now. So I could come in here and I could select tungsten, and you can just tell that that is going to just really go to the other end where it makes it very, very cool. And that's probably not too accurate, right? And we can double check that by clicking or scrolling down here, and you can see 139, 176, 209. So that tells us there's a very strong blue tint and a little bit of a green tint to it as well. And so we can't really trust that too much. We could go to auto and see what it does, and it looks not too bad, but still on this object, it is not quite correct. So again, we're going to click on that eyedropper, click right there, and now this is pretty accurate right here. Now, the background of the scene looks pretty yellow. And sometimes that's okay. You might have to sacrifice something like that in order to get your object correct. If you'll remember earlier, I was talking about like what's most important in a bridal scene. Well, the bride's dress. So in this case, if I got the dress correct and then some other things in the background looked a little bit different because they were under different lighting, then that would be acceptable because I really just want to focus on this. So with raw files, I can come in here and I can change those around, and I have just limitless opportunity to change the color. So here we are with the JPEGs, and basically all I did with these images is when I shot them, I shot RAW plus JPEG, so I knew I would have both at the same time. So here we go with the same image shot in the daylight setting. Now, notice that I don't have the same panel over here that I had in Camera Raw because this is the full version of Photoshop. So how do you uh, get that little eyedropper tool? Well, it's more complicated, but I'm just going to click on curves in my adjustment panel. And over here, I have 3 different eyedroppers. Now, there is an advanced way to do this that I can teach at a later time, but these 3 eyedroppers, if you hover over them, you'll see this one is going to say sample an image to set black point. So what that really means is that if I wanted to make sure this image was totally color balanced, I could balance the black parts, the shadow parts. Down here is going to be for the white areas, the highlight areas, and this is the midtones. We're only going to worry about the midtones right now. And over here in my info panel, you can see these numbers on RGB. They kind of bounce around. So once again, I'm going to come down here and you can see it says 145, 159, 172. I'm going to click, and that's going to change those to 161, 158, 158, because those are the numbers on the right side. So basically what it's done is it's remapped the pixels from what was 145 is now 161 for red, and so on and so forth. So this is a JPEG, so you can't do a whole lot of editing, but because there was such a small shift in pixels, you can see that, like, the biggest pixel shift wasn't more than, 17 pixels there, or levels, sorry. That, a JPEG, you can make minor edits to it, but let's go take a look at this image. This is the one that was shot with the daylight white balance setting, and then it was shot under tungsten lighting. So let's do the same thing. Come into curves, click on the middle eyedropper, come down into this area. So it did make a change, but take a look. It cannot quite get it right. 177, 177, 188. That is not actually neutral at that point. It still has a little bit too much blue in it. So at this point, I can come in here and I could do a couple different things. I could do like a color balance and just move that, bring that blue down just a little bit, and come in here and look and see it's 179, 179, 185. Or I could go back into curves and manipulate it there. And you see it's just not quite getting there. I could keep messing with it. But the point being, in RAW, I can just click one thing and fix it because it has so much latitude to fix it. But with a JPEG, I have to do some extra changes, and sometimes those changes still aren't exactly accurate. So RAW is just a lot easier to mess with for color editing. So let's bring it all together. White balance really is just a setting that is trying to make sure your camera neutralizes color, right? It tries to make sure that whatever should be neutral in that image is neutral, and if it is neutral, then everything else should look normal to a regular, to a person with normal color vision. And that's really what we're going for, is we're not going to get the colors 100% accurate all the time. And luckily we don't need to, because people have, our brains are constantly playing tricks on us to see colors the way that we think they should be, maybe not exactly 100% the way they actually are. And that really helps us in photography, that we don't have to get it 100% perfect. We just have to get it as close as we possibly can. Auto white balance typically is going to do a pretty good job of that. However, if you find yourself being limited by auto white balance and under certain situations it's not quite accurate, then maybe just try some of those presets. The big thing I would recommend if you're a beginner is really just go out and try different things, right? And in fact, fail on purpose. So go outside in a sunny situation and set your camera to incandescent and see what you get. Try, flip-flop that and go in under incandescent lights and set it to daytime, to daylight, or to cloudy and see what you get. And it will start to all kind of mesh and make sense that it's going to make things look very orange or very blue. And it's like, okay, well, it's because I told it I was in this certain setting, so it's going to try and overload it with orange, but there was already a lot of orange there, or vice versa. So play around a little bit, fail on purpose. That is one of the best ways to learn, in my opinion. And then try to hone yourself in on, is auto white balance working well for me? If not, what am I going to do to change that? And I'm going to tell you a secret. I've been shooting for a long time and I use auto white balance 95% of the time. It's only when I have a really challenging scene do I really change it up. But also I do shoot raw and I know how to easily edit those images later if I need to. And that brings me to my last point. This whole conversation about white balance, it's kind of the tip of the iceberg for a deeper conversation about color management. Getting the colors right in the camera versus getting the colors right on your computer and then having them go to print. There is a whole topic there to be covered that I will do at a later time to help you get those images accurate from the time that you see them to the time that you print them. There's a lot that goes into that though, so that is a deeper topic, again, that I will cover at a later time. Thanks for watching.